Hello, podcast listener. Enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World with Kerry Shelton. He's a man who knows everything about video, not just pushing record and waiting for a red light to pop on. We talk about the history. Plus, he has a great story about Motley Crue that you guys are really going to dig. And I talk about the most embarrassing home movie that is sitting in my home video collection. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. This episode of JJ Meets World is brought to you by Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. Natalie has a proven track record to get your home sold faster and for more money. She is consistently focused on her clients' needs and wants throughout the entire process and make sure that they are well taken care of. If you're looking to buy or sell, reach out to Natalie today. On average, Natalie sells a home every 3.74 days. That's at least 2 a week. And last year, Natalie earned her clients on average over $4,000 above list price on their homes. And you don't have to take our word for it. Here's some of the great reviews Natalie has received. I was overwhelmingly impressed with Natalie and all the Hatch team. She was very responsive and responded to all of the emails within an hour. She gave great advice and encouragement from the listing and pictures, the offer, and all the closing details. The marketing team knew exactly how to promote my property, and I was pleased by how soon and easily my property received an offer. I was actually dreading selling my condo, and Natalie did such an awesome job that I felt like I really didn't need to do anything. The thing I most appreciated was that she really listened to what I wanted to do and respected my decisions. I would definitely recommend Natalie and all the Hatch Realty team. They made this process so wonderful. That was from Diane. So listen, if you're in the mood to buy or sell a home, give Natalie a call right now. You can reach her at 701-388-9338. Natalie, Natalie, at hatchrealtyfm.com, or you can go to livefargomorehead.com. That's livefargomorehead.com and find out some information. Huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. JJ Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. JJ has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
I think every family has, at one point or another, some family videos, some home movies that they've captured, whether it's on an 8mm tape. I remember someone taped my grandfather skiing in what must have been like the 1950s. Mm-hmm. And then they transferred that to a VHS tape, and now we've transferred it to a DVD. And I love watching that footage, and I love thinking about the fact that this started off as somebody using a film camera to go to a cassette tape to a DVD, and eventually someone will put it online. Mm-hmm. Like this one piece, this one like image has had a life that has it's like a phoenix rising from the ashes over and over and over again. And I just love watching older stuff. You know, there's no audio to it because it's just the 8mm. And I think sometimes that we kind of think, well, we got the home movies and they're there, but you don't revisit them enough. You don't revisit them enough so that you know in the knowledge that can be passed on to the next generation. So that's your great aunt Edith. This is, Muriel. She lived down the street, because there are clips where I watch and I'm like, I don't know any of these people. And also why did we wave at the camera when that first became a thing? Like this really fast wave that everyone did when you were walking around a room.
You're saying hello to the future is what you're doing.
I guess so. I also have one home video that I wish I could delete, but you got to keep it for posterity. When I was probably in 8th grade, there was a section of a home movie that we had on VHS that was somebody had taped like a race boat competition. And I decided, you know what? I'll do a little like update on where the family's at. And so it's me wearing a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle shirt and pants taken from a downward angle looking up, which is never flattering, and being like Hey, it's me, it's JJ. It's 1998, and this is where everyone's at in the family. And we have Kramer the cat, and I look back at that now and cringe. It's a good thing no one has that tape other than me, because it is one of the most embarrassing pieces of footage that I have out there. And there is a video of just my testicles falling out of a costume that's out there. And but this thing from 8th grade is worse.
Yep.
Way worse.
The main difference is that the thing from 8th grade only you have.
Yeah,
That's
right.
the main difference.
The other one is
the
Tucker
other
has
footage
it.
you are not in possession of.
Right. No control. But we look fondly back at video, and it's got a big future. You know, nowadays you're carrying around a camera with you 24/7, and the way we consume video has changed. The way we distribute video has changed, and there's no better guest to talk about that than our guest today, Kerry Shelton. Kerry is one of those guys who people love working with. Kerry. You'd be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't immediately say, that's one of the nicest guys. That's one of the most creative guys. That is one of the hardest working guys I've ever met. And Kerry, I've been on shoots with Kerry. We get to detail those right at the beginning of this podcast, but it is a lot of fun. He's got advice. He's got great stories. If you're a Motley Crue fan, get ready to hold on to the edge of your seat. And we talk about where video has come, where it might, end up as far as who should be the next stewards of that art form. And we have a lot of fun with this one. And I think this is a good one with Tucker too, because Tucker and Kerry share the same sensibilities when it comes to production. And so I think that there's a lot of moments here where you really relate to what's going on.
I get a lot of it from Kerry. He was my boss for a couple of years at Sundog, and he's just one of the best bosses I've ever had. And he's someone who is really good at educating and nurturing young talent and moving the profession forward.
Well, listen, I'm not going to waste any more time. Sit back, relax, enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World with Kerry Shelton.
JJ Meets World.
Kerry Shelton, welcome to the JJ Meets World studios. How are you?
I'm good, JJ. Thanks.
Any relation to Blake?
Yes, actually, he's my father, younger father.
See, I knew that. I knew it.
It's kind of funny because when you say my name, first of all, Kerry, they always get it's Kenny, it's something, it's Larry. They don't hear Kerry. It's one of those things. And
Kerry.
Yeah, but Shelton they hear. So then I always kick it off like Blake Shelton, Then they're like, oh, okay, yeah. And then I have to go back and explain Kerry anyways. But it's that stupid little conversation thingy.
Right, it's your icebreaker, right? How much does a polar bear weigh?
Exactly.
Enough to break the ice. Kerry Shelton, damn glad to meet you. I always find names to be one of those things where you have to psych yourself up a little bit. Like, have you ever been in the elevator and been like, wait, is it Barry or Larry?
Yes.
Is it Barry or Larry? Which one is it, Barry or Larry?
Yes, and actually, the name thing is weird because I'm really good at locations I've been to, things that have happened on those locations, but first names are one of those things that don't stay in my head. So, then I know because as a Kerry, that doesn't stay in people's heads either. But I've always struggled with I can tell you. Pick a date in 1984 on a location and a set, and we were shooting something, and I had a camera and angle. I can remember all that, but the first name of the guy that was doing the gaffing or lighting that time, I'm like, God, that's the first name.
Remember, he was from Tuscaloosa, though.
That's right. He had wavy blonde hair. He was kind of cute.
The last time I hung out with you, Kerry, we were shooting that Doritos commercial, and what was amazing is I don't know anybody else on the planet who's got a catfish guy.
Let's do some context building here. Doritos commercial. So what was the story with that gentleman?
My involvement was Jason Jacobson called me and said, listen, we're going to put one of these Doritos fan-made commercials, and it gets voted on the net, and the one that wins ends up going to air during the Super Bowl. Would you want to be southern fella wearing full
Vaguely southern. Very vaguely southern.
Well, I don't want to say redneck, but that's really the vibe.
Definitely redneck.
Who's catfish noodling, and you pull out a mermaid instead because you've got Cheetos dust on your fingers.
That's right.
And I was like, yeah, it sounds good. That sounds just fine to me. And it was at your lake place, was it?
Place, yeah, in Otter Tail County. So that's exact. Jason came. We were sitting around. We were working together, and we were sitting around. And first of all, Doritos. What a beautiful concept! You just had 10,000 people make free commercials for you and give it to you. And you get to choose which one you like. And it doesn't really matter because they all play on the internet. The noodling one is what, 20, 30 million views or something. It's got crazy numbers on it. But it was one of those deals where we started talking and driving. We were on a shoot someplace in it. And he was, throwing out there. I'm like, these are great ideas. Let's just do it. I mean, what the hell? We'll just do it. And so we started trying to plot out, where could we film it? And it was late in the season too.
Yeah,
by
docks were out of the water.
It was September. The water was not that warm. Matter of fact, I can't remember. Was it Phil that finally we had to get him into a warm shower? Because you guys were in the water for like 5 hours. It was a long time.
We were with actually every single person who's in that commercial, with the exception of Jacob, have been on this podcast.
Yeah,
so the mermaid Shelley Fink with the Air National Guard. I felt bad for Shelley and Phil because they were both mermaids. But I mean, I was in full clothes when we were in there. The difficult thing was there's a shelf that has a pretty significant drop off your beach, and if you take one step further back than you need to, you are going under the water completely.
That's right.
But we had to be far enough back so that it wasn't just up to our knees. That was such a fun shoot. That was just a wonderful, wonderful day.
I know that the base concept is that you guys are noodling, but I don't really think that's ever explicit. Is it even in the subtitles?
No.
So really, you're three rednecks standing in water. And you happen to be eating Doritos, right?
Because Davey pulls out a catfish.
Yeah. He does. Okay.
He's got his hand and then he pulls out a
he
full
does
size.
Wait a second. And you're like,
okay.
He's got something.
Gotcha.
And then and it's so funny because people thought that was a full-on real Doritos commercial. So much so that Field and Stream magazine wrote a piece on it about how noodling is now part of the popular culture. Even Doritos has made a commercial for it.
Yeah.
And there was a German game show that got into this thing.
I think the most I've seen it shared on Facebook is from Facebook pages that are not in English.
Yes. Yep.
And it's subtitled in like every language on the planet.
For some reason, Finland and that whole region of the world was really big into it. They shared it a ton, and I never did quite figure that out. But that was a strange one because when we started the concept, the idea, and then we'd done the other one too, the Flavor Plane it was called, where
Scott Horvick and Kerry Winterstein.
Yeah, Scott, yep. So we used Perry Russ's house. That's his porch. We shot the scene on the front part. We actually went to a field, dug a bunch of trenches, and then put the little pods of Doritos out into them, and then duplicated the rest of the field in post. But when we were searching on the noodling one, we this whole idea. Well, then I had to go on the internet and I had to find the mermaid outfit, which I felt creepy about because
probably on a company computer at the time.
Exactly. And most of the time, people buying they were for kids,
right.
Not
grown women.
I had to find one, that would fit Shelley as well as. Because they shared the same outfit. Yeah. Phil was Phil,
very different body types.
It was. So then we had clamps on the back of hers because it was too big, way too big for her. And
then you had I can't remember. Did you provide or did you ask Shelley to bring like a bikini top for it?
She brought the bikini top. Yeah,
and it matches so well. You would think like you must have bought this together as a set. And I believe Phil wears the top too. Does he? I can't remember.
Where were you setting the camera? Were you on the crane?
No, we actually hauled ladders out into the water, like 8-foot ladders, and we put the tracks between, and we dolly off of that. But we did it off of the.
Okay, gotcha.
The end of my point is too soft for the camera crane to get out there. And
so you were basically you were standing in the water with it, just keeping the camera above water.
Yeah, Rob Burke was running the camera, and it was Jason and I kind of co-directing, or he was more directing, and I was just making sure that logistically everything was working like it was supposed to work. So
it was one of the best shoots I've ever been on.
It was fun. And then we did a bunch of
life.
handheld stuff too. So was camera handheld. We'd get off into the water with, everybody was in the water all day.
Mm-hmm.
It was.
I remember Jason trying to direct Shelley and being like, less sexual with the Doritos, because every time I'd have to get my hands covered in Cheeto dust, and she'd be licking it off, and it started off as way too sexual, and had to dial it back. And Shelley she was trying over and over, but she was like, okay, well, this is so weird. And finally, we figured out, if I dip my fingers in the water and then in the bag of Cheetos, I get more adhesion.
Yeah.
And so now it's lake water and Cheeto chunks. And
I felt so bad. She had by far the worst. That she had to keep going under the water and sucking on your fingers, and then coming back out and acting like that's the first time I've done that,
and not throwing up the whole time.
Right. It was so much fun. And it is the only thing I've ever been a part of that has gone as viral as that has, 20, 30 million views. It once a week, someone posts on my Facebook, hey, this showed up on a sportsman's page I'm a part of, or this showed up on, like funniest video feeds and stuff like that. So
it was, for all of us, I think I had fun with it. I know Jason did. I know Lon on the edit side did. It took a lot of work. I know after the shoot, it was a week's or better worth of edit and trying to cut it and get it down. And, you get 25 seconds really by the time you put the Dorito tag at the end and all that. Well, that's 25 seconds to cut that whole thing down it was a challenge, but it by far was one of the most fun things we have got to just have the freedom to do with, really no direction except for whatever we wanted to do. So that was fun.
Just end up with the product.
Yeah. End up with something that everybody liked. So.
What, do you cringe when someone says that they're going to shoot and use natural light?
No.
You love natural light?
I do. Yep.
Can't that add like a real pressure to a shoot?
It's easier now that cameras are more sensitive, and that the camera chips are more sensitive, because that's the thing is there enough light to expose the image to what the camera needs to get it in? And it used to be that digital sensors just weren't that sensitive, but now, I mean, goodness.
And I think the whole the acceptance, and not tolerance, but acceptance or expectation of what people are willing to watch and to see, and it doesn't seem like it's judged as much. I know, even in, from the bigger scenes and the bigger corporate, like the day we shot we didn't use any shiny boards. We didn't have any extra fill light. The water bounced a lot of light for us back up, but a lot of places they would have had shiny boards, big giant shiny boards out there just pumping all kinds of light in. And would it make a difference? Yes, it would. Does it make a difference to really light things? Yeah, it does. But sometimes the beauty of what the light happening is a great way to tell a story. And I don't know. I go back to I'd rather figure out what the great story is, and I think we all would watch a great story and accept a little shadow here or there, or a little light that maybe wasn't quite as where you should be, if the story holds you or makes you engaged into it or whatever. So that's, to me, I think that's always the trick of anything I've ever shot is, how do we tell a great story? How does it be something? How is it something that somebody really wants to watch and feel whatever, whether they're laughing or crying or learning something or whatever?
Did you ever watch the film Barry Lyndon by Stanley Kubrick?
I don't know if I have or not.
I really like the movie. It's a slow period piece. But the sort of, I don't know if you want to call it a gimmick, but they shot essentially the entire film with natural light, only natural light. I think there was one or two scenes where they couldn't help it. They had to bring in some sort of electrical light, but a scene that looks like it's lit by candlelight is lit by candlelight, and a scene that looks like it, because Kubrick was going for a realistic look of the time period where everything would have just been natural light.
Yeah.
And that's when they could only use film. They didn't have digital processing they didn't have digital cameras at the time.
And and I think I've come I've come 30 some years into this industry, really living on shoestrings most of the time. We didn't have Hollywood budgets. I've never had giant budget, so you're always trying to figure out, how do I tell what I need to tell on a tight schedule or in a tight budget? And there's two of us on this shoot. I can't drink 50 lights and have an out 5 hours to set, and those kind of things. So you kind of you learn and adapt to what you have and and I think that's kind of always been my philosophy is you got to figure out, what do I have? How do I make the best out of that?
So 30 years has seen some pretty drastic changes in your industry.
Absolutely. When I started, I spliced film. I had I Love Lucy was in the afternoon, and I had to splice in the commercials. So you'd go through the film, you'd spin it along, and you'd get to the spot where you could tell there was a break, and they would put just a blank strip of film in there, so it'd just be white or green or whatever color it was. So you knew that's where you insert commercial here, kind of a deal. So you'd cut it, and you would put your 2, 3, 4 commercials in there, and then you would splice back into the film, and you'd let it. That's how you put the half-hour show together. So then once you got the film all edited, once I Love Lucy started or pick another show, it would run, and then when the break would come, it would run the commercials, and then it'd get back to the show again. So
when I was at Columbia, I was one of, I think, the last classes that actually shot on film, and then they put us in front of a Steinbeck to manipulate. And I always tell people, I'm very nostalgic for it, and I think that there is an art to it where making a cut. When you made a cut, it's look 3 times, cut once. It's not like today where you click undo, save a project in different ways. But I can't imagine ever going back to that because it's streamlined processes so much. It's allowed more people to work on the same project, and so I think if people say it's got to be one way or the other, it's like, no, there's a little bit of magic on both sides.
I would totally agree. It was, and when I started, I didn't know I was 18, 19 years old. I was just happy to be doing something in the industry. So I didn't know. It's not like I lived in film for a long, long time, but I did live it enough to understand that the good old days were not always the good old days, just like anything else. Sometimes with the good old days, but when we transitioned, there was videotape going on at the same time. It's not like every show played off of film. It was just some of the older ones that came in like that. So there were still other shows that were taped on tape, 2-inch tape, and you had tape reels. But, it quickly was, all of a sudden I was into the 3/4-inch world where you had the separate deck and a cable, and each field tape was only 20 minutes worth of tape. So you were constantly dragging all kinds of tapes with you, to do a story. Sometimes it would take 2 or 3 tapes, maybe sometimes more. So, but you were constantly, batteries were an issue. They don't last like they do today. Cameras were 5 times the size they are now, and they didn't look nearly as good as the small ones. Matter of fact, they don't look nearly as good as your phone shooting film or video right now. So it was a whole different, but when you were in it and that's all there was, you were excited just to be a part of it. It was exciting just to have a role or feel like you were a part of that the industry as it was developing. So,
if anyone has ever seen the movie Boogie Nights, I think that they have got the most just perfect scene for somebody who was in the world of film transitioning into video, where the Burt Reynolds is talking about, like, okay, so how long? They're like, it's video. You start it and then you just shoot. And he's like, but how long is it? How many feet do you have this? He goes, it's video. You just start and then you keep going. And that concept of thing like, oh yeah, I have more than 7 minutes that I can run, right now before I run out of tape.
Yeah.
I think that's just wild. I also remember like an era where when I was at Columbia, P2 cards were becoming like really big, and they're like, you can shoot for 5 minutes straight, and then we just pop it out, and then you go and you transfer it, and and then you go back. And nowadays, like you said, on my phone, I could accidentally record the inside of my pocket for 15 hours, instantly upload it to the web, and it could be seen by 10 million people.
Exactly.
It's just great.
It's crazy, and it is great. in the early days, you really had a couple of canvases. As a video person, you could either shoot it and it would go to a tape that would get distributed or not, or it would go on to a newscast or something like that, or it'd end up on a film in a theater. And it's just, you didn't have all this the canvas, you all these different channels, all these different ways of sharing it. I just think it's awesome. I am thrilled that I get a little snippet of what this is before it goes past my shooting time and prime time, and it goes off to the next generations of filmmakers and video makers. But I just think it's a great time. I love the smaller tools, I guess I'd call them. When I used to do outdoor shows with Ed Schultz back in the day too, when he first started the Great Outdoors. And, we would travel to the Northwest Territories, and you would drag a giant 3/4 camera, a giant 3/4 deck, all this tape, all these batteries, a generator, because there was no power up there, and then you would drag that wherever you went, and it was just hundreds and hundreds of pounds worth of gear to videotape, these half-hour shows. It was, nowadays, I travel when I shoot, and we go do filming for Bobcat or Doosan or some of the companies we do stuff for. I travel with 5 or 6 cameras at all times because they're all tools. A drone, the little action or POV cameras, 2 different kinds of stabilized cameras, the bigger camera, the bigger lens, the smaller camera, the wider lens. And I can travel with all that stuff on an airplane and have no troubles getting around. Where back in the day, it was like, oh, this is
where's the production van?
Yeah, this is going to kill me. We portage, for 2 miles across between 2 lakes, and we're dragging this giant sled of, with a generator and all this other stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is, but I didn't know any better, so we thought we were living the dream. It was, wow, we were in the middle of nowhere filming, and it was cool.
Wouldn't it be wild to go back to 1990 and talk to yourself at that time and be like, let me tell you about what the future is going to hold here. Like, you just think about this. It's going to be a lot of work.
You are going to see a movie where Spider-Man is going to ride on Thor's hammer thrown by Captain America wearing a suit built by Iron Man. And I would have been like, you're full of it. That is never going to happen.
Oh.
So let's talk a little bit about the creative process, because there are people out there who spend their careers not doing anything that is remotely fun. I think of, if you've ever seen the show Parks and Recreation, there's this sequence where one of the characters goes to apply for a job at an accounting firm, and he tells a joke like, well, you can count on me being here Monday. And then they're like, oh, like, we got to get Cheryl in here to hear this amazing joke. And I think sometimes I take for granted that, like, I get a chance every day to have fun at my job. And I imagine that there are frustrating moments, but you've had the opportunity to have a lot of fun throughout the years.
Yeah, and we've started talking more about this because it has been a ride, a journey. It's nothing I thought about. It's like everybody's like, well, what's your 5-year plan? I never had. I just was in the moment. I love doing what I was doing. I was always surrounded by really super talented people, and that was always fun. The other creative minds, because when you get a room going and you have these different creative minds and you start bantering back and forth ideas and trying to come up with something and thinking about really what's the end goal, it just can't be a funny idea. We're trying to accomplish something on the creative side from marketing point of view and from a storytelling view. So, but it's always just been a blast. Yes, absolutely. There's been frustrating times and long, 16, 18, 20-hour days of, this doesn't work right, that didn't work right, this gear didn't show up, or that didn't show up, or somebody wasn't, but it to that point of I loving what you do, and that's why I'm still doing it. I turned 58 and I still love what I do. I can't imagine myself not doing this for quite a while yet, because I really love what I do. Now, do I love getting up at 3 a.m. to go set up a 5:30 in the morning shot? No, but it still is intriguing enough to me and to want to do that and to to say, okay, let's take on another project. Let's take on something else. And that's one other thing too, is over the years from the creative standpoint, there's so many ways that you can do things like that. When I first started, I was in sports. I did five years of nothing but sports, nights, weekends, Twins, Vikings, had traveled the United States shooting all kinds of ESPN2 stuff. And I loved it. And then it got to a point where it's like, okay, that's been really fun, but now if I want to raise a family, I don't want to work every night and every weekend. So that changed, and I moved into the news side of it, and I love that. And Kevin Wallivan and I spent a ton of time together. Matter of fact, he was an intern at DAY when I was in the sports department. I was chief sports photographer, and he had started as the intern.
Previous podcast guest Kevin Wallivan.
Yeah. So, and then we hit it off. We thought alike, but we also fought alike. I mean, we would get into an edit room. We'd fight over what the story was or wasn't, and what shots and how they should say things. It's that collaboration, that working together, trying to make. So, but we just hit it off. We traveled the world together. We did aircraft carriers to Peter Jennings, to Diane Sawyer, to South America and in Peru, and just had a fabulous time being able to tell those fun stories. And and he's a great storyteller. He's somebody that gets it. He gets the connection, and he's easy to talk to, and he works hard at telling that story. So, but I did that for enough years where. Okay, now what's next? How do I continue to have fun and be collaborative and tell stories? And we started our own video company and worked it off into that, and merged it with another video company, and now we're back off into another production company, and I'm teamed up with a different group. So, but it's been a fabulous storytelling, coming up with creative ideas, and just having fun with it, and not. Yeah, am I serious? But yes and no. It's marketing, it's video, it's not always that serious. So I don't look at it that way. But it's been a fun adventure. Matter of fact, okay, the side story.
Yeah,
sorry.
go for it.
So I watched the movie about Motley Crue, and I think it's called. What's the one they just came out with? Said it's their.
Oh yeah, I'm blanking on the name of it. Yeah,
the word "loud" is in it, right?
No, I don't. So I'm on a flight. We're going someplace, and it's on in the airplane. So I'm like, hey, let's watch this. I start watching it. It flips me back in time. In 1983, 84, they had the sports department at WDAY just started up. Ed Schultz had just joined. So it was myself, Dana Mock, Jim Heilman, Brian Walls. We were the sports department, and we were growing it. We were doing things locally that nobody else had really done in that way. And we went to one of NDSU's early national championship games down in McAllen, Texas. Stayed at a Holiday Inn hotel down in McAllen, Texas. We drove, I think it was Jim Heilman's dad's van camper thing all the way down there from here because DAY didn't want to pay for a flight. So we drove this. So we get there, we park it in the parking lot. Two of us are going to sleep in the camper, and then two are going to sleep in the hotel, the Holiday Inn. So we go into the Holiday Inn, and Jim Heilman is a rock and roll guy, always has been, always will be. So we're standing in the bar. Dana and I don't know. And we start drinking, and we're drinking with these long-haired guys, and Dana and I have no idea who these guys are. If you go to the movie, there's a scene at a Holiday Inn in the movie in McAllen, Texas, 1983-84. I can't remember whether it's the first year Motley Crue actually toured the country with Ozzy Osbourne. And that was one of their stops, was McAllen, Texas. And we sat and drank with Motley Crue.
Oh, wow.
That's
in
awesome.
that hotel. And I had no idea who they were until Jim Heilman was like, they have Motley Crue. And Dana and I were both like, who? I mean, this is I didn't know who they were. And so Dana and I were like, it's like 2 a.m. We're like, we're done. We're going back. And Jim's like, no, man, they just invited us up to the room. And Dana and I are like, no, I'm going to bed. It's 2 a.m. And to this day, Jim Heilman went off with them and went up to Motley Crue's room I have no idea. He has never told me.
We do have an invite out to him and to Jody to come on this podcast. He may or may not ever tell us what happened up there.
He has never told myself or Dana that I know of.
Well, I wonder if he'll ever immortalize it in podcast form and for everyone to hear.
I don't know.
Jim, come on, let's play cribbage.
It was one of those deals where you're like, what? And then all of a sudden, years later, I look back, I'm like, are you kidding me? We sat and drank with Motley Crue when that was their first tour outside of, they had done tours or done concerts in LA. They were a big deal in LA, but this was their deal. We never did see Ozzy though. It was just Motley was in the band.
That's wild.
That's crazy.
I love when people have their like brush with celebrity and you don't even realize it at the time. Like all of a sudden you go like, wait, hold on. What?
That's right.
One of my favorite stories that my dad used to love to tell was we went down to the Twins game with his business partner and his kids, and we were at a hotel and we were all the kids are swimming, and then I ran into the bar to ask my dad for pizza money. And he's like, JJ, I'd like you to meet John. And I was like, yeah, how's it going? And my dad obviously was like, you should be making a bigger deal about what's going on. And so I was like, I just want some pizza money. And so the guy was like, you're going to order a pizza now, huh? And I said, yeah. And he's like, I like pizza too. And later that night, I was like, who the heck was that guy? And he's like, that was Johnny Unitas. Oh. And I was like, who? Because I wasn't a sports guy.
You hadn't watched The Adventures of Pete and Pete yet.
Not yet. Yeah, I would have had a lot to talk about. Like, Nickelodeon show. Yeah. I don't know what you're talking about, son. But I love when people have like a great, amazing story like that, and to know that you were in the right place at the right time.
It was weird. Never. I mean, it was one of the. You're exactly right. I never thought about it. We were there to cover the Bison. That's what I mean. That's all I was thinking. I wasn't thinking we were going to run into Motley Crue, nor did I even know who they were at the time. And so that was a fun story. Normally, when you get a film or a shoot going on, you kind of know what you're getting into, or where the reasons you're there. We did stuff with Peter Jennings and Diane Sawyer, and Maureen Zimmerman and I went and did a space shuttle launch down in Florida. So you kind of know, okay, that's what I'm getting into. And we ended up doing stuff with Jim Heilman, Jim Shaw and I did a bunch of interviews with Davy Jones from the Monkees, and so you kind of knew you knew who the people were.
You shot an interview with Obama before he was president. He was during that election.
Yeah, I've had the chance. I filmed Reagan in Bismarck in 1980, and in the 80 election.
Meaning you were in the room.
We were in the room. We filmed him while he was doing his interviews and stuff. But yeah, with Obama, it was
Yonker
Farm upstairs in the little tiny room. Yeah, and it was just myself, Phil, our son Corey, and then Ed Schultz, and then Mr. Obama at the time, Senator Obama, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's awesome.
we did both Bushes. So. And who else was there?
Clinton. Have you added that one?
Mrs.
It's always been on my bucket list to meet a sitting head of state.
Yeah.
So I haven't done it yet, but I always thought that one way to do that would probably be through some sort of video gig, where someone needs to interview that person, and so they need a videographer and an audio person to do it.
They got lucky on one time. Kevin Wallerman and I again in Minneapolis. It was when Gorbachev was doing the United States tour, so we went there to film it. We were along this road where he was going to drive by, and that was going to be our shot. Well, it turns out his motorcade stops and he gets out and starts walking the street and just, kind of doing the old politician thing where people just waving. And so I'm standing there. There's like these two sheriff people in front of me, and I'm rolling. It's handheld. I'm rolling. I'm looking at them, and all of a sudden, two other photographers go under the rope and kind of out onto the road and kind of do that back walk with them and film. And I'm looking at the sheriff, and I'm looking. They're already, and she goes. The one sheriff lady says, "Okay." She pulls the rope. I run out there. Kevin doesn't go with me, so I go out there and I do this back walk, and I get within like 2 or 3 feet of him. So I'm like the main camera walking backwards, and here's Gorbachev followed or surrounded by these KGB agents, and they're all kind of got their hands on me, kind of pushing me back, and I'm walking, and we get done, and he gets back in the motorcade, and I'm just standing there like, how did this just happen? Why did this just happen? So, but it was one of those things where it's like, wow, okay, that was really cool.
And at least it didn't end with you going, I didn't press record.
I didn't. No, that's right. That is a bad feeling sometimes when you always hit record.
Yeah, always hit record.
So.
Yeah, there's a red light for a purpose, right? Most of the time.
And you're constantly staring to make sure it's still rolling on.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
It's your worst fear. But nowadays, my worst fear is a card failing on me or a hard drive failing on me. In the old days, you'd pop the tape out and, well, look I got it. It's right there, unless I rub it over a magnet or do something like that, or it tears or breaks or something.
Although that tape had mechanical components as well.
It did.
And it would be footage that's going to break down over time and everything else. There's never been like, this is the perfect, ultra eloquent solution when it comes to grabbing that kind of thing.
Yep.
I wish every camera system had redundant, almost 3 times redundant recording capabilities if possible. That'd be nice.
Yep.
I love that in our region, things people create for marketing can have a much longer shelf life than it would anywhere else in the country. For example, the Smokies Steakhouse ads played for years after their creation.
Yep.
There was a cellular communications ad that John Marks was in that I swear to God played for 9 years.
Really?
I love the fact that some places shoot one ad and the life of their business is that same commercial over and over and over.
It's great savings.
It's kind of funny. The Smokies thing, it was during my era when I first started at DIY, would have been the early 80s. So Smokies was, I never had any, I know that Lon Keller, I think, who I work with still, I think he had an edit on one of them.
We'll have to get Lon on the podcast at some point.
That's the only person I know. Jim Heilman had worked at KX before, and that's who did the production.
It was through the new station.
KX did, it was. I'm pretty sure it was KX that did those. And I can't remember if he was on a couple of those shoots or not, but he might have been. But it was one of those things where we would all watch it in the business, and we were like, "Oh my!" And then, but you're like, it worked,
right?
And that's all that matters. In the end of the day, is. Did it work?
So that just made me think of something I wanted to remind myself to bring up to you. I think we maybe spoke about this once before. So there's this film festival, sort of a roving film festival called the Found Footage Film Festival. And it comes to Fargo a couple of years. It goes to the aquarium. Number of years ago, they came to the aquarium, and as of right now, an unnamed person, a mysterious figure that we don't know yet, approaches them and says, listen, I've got a hard drive to give you right now full of news bloopers. I've worked at various news stations in town here for years, and I've been saving video clips of weird news bloopers and stuff, and I think you guys would want them.
And the film festival is comprised of odd things someone found on a VHS tape.
Weird things at a pawn shop or in your VCR, and it's all supposed to be cringy or you're kind of making fun of it while you're watching it. So they loved these news bloopers so much that they programmed it into their 2017 Found Footage Film Festival, which there's a copy of online because it's a whole presentation of them talking and then queuing up some clips and then showing it. And so the 2017 one opens with like 6 minutes of local, I think it's both KX4 and KDHI are the 2 news stations that are represented on there. And I didn't know if you had heard about that at all, but this was someone who had been working and been saving these things. Yeah. And so there's a lot of like,
it is
locals.
Glorious.
It's pretty sweet.
Watch.
I'm going to hook you up with a copy of it.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. I'd like to.
Yeah, it even made like the trailer for that year. There was a little excerpt from it.
It's a phenomenal segment. I think Kevin Wollivant is in it.
Yeah,
falling over at a distance, like he had set up a camera and then was like talking into the camera, 100 feet away, and then slipped on ice or something like that. But I'll have to hook you up with it.
There's a bee, if I'm not mistaken, right? There's somebody who's got like, oh my god,
there's Madeline picking his nose.
Yep,
a bunch of times. At the same time, with a trip in a tank full.
So you would have had to been in the business because that footage would have never made the air.
No. It's all stuff that this guy was collecting.
So you're cutting that out.
I've talked to Goose about it. I've talked to a few other people. We're trying to figure out who this person was, and by looking at the footage, footage, you can tell where they were working at the time too. But at the same time, clips like that were probably trading between various people because it's a small community in town here.
But back in the tape days, though, I mean, every tape got recycled like every other day,
right?
Because nobody wanted, none of the news spaces wanted to buy tape because they were $50 a tape. So you would use a 20-minute 3/4 tape, 150 times before it finally would completely wear out and you couldn't use it anymore. So. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's to whoever's pulling this apart.
This was an insider
for sure. They were pulling it apart as they were going and saving it because those tapes would have gotten recycled.
Yeah.
And to hand over a hard drive, like to say, like, there's enough stuff on this thing that you're
please
gonna love
have this. I've been collecting this for years.
I'd be fascinated to watch that because
I'll get it. I'll get you a copy of it.
That'd be awesome.
Dan Michaels used to tell me about how radio Christmas parties used to be a blast because when you record it on tape still and you're trying to read this ad and you mess it up and you have this long line of expletives or you keep saying like minus toe, mint, get it together. And what they would do is someone would find that and then just cut it and save it in a drawer. And at the Christmas party, they would play like a 45-minute long loop of all of these people messing up over and over and over again. And I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall back in the day to get to witness some of those. And nowadays, you don't get that as much, right? Because you just edit and it's on your computer and it's gone unless you purposely save it.
Yep.
It's really a disappointment sometimes because I would love, even when I'm cutting my own ads, I will think of like, oh, it sounds like garbage. Why, and just delete it all. But somebody probably would really enjoy listening to that.
What's funny is I've always thought it was fairly tragic how ephemeral all that old video and film footage was and how it was treated. I've been on a mission for years to try to find this footage that I'm sure is probably missing. It's just gone. Just doesn't exist anymore. Years ago, family reunion. Family puts together a big booklet. It's full of photos. So I'm looking through it. And in there is a photo of my grandfather, who at the time was the president of like the North Dakota Teachers Association or something. So this would have been in the 50s. And he's at the North Dakota Democratic State Convention. And the photo is of him standing in front of a camera with a microphone in his hand. And he's talking. He's a very young man. And it's not obvious who is filming him. If it's news, if it's the Democratic Party, or what this is, who is talking to him at that moment. But if that footage were to exist, it would be the oldest sound footage of my grandfather talking into a microphone. And so I've reached out to their organization in Bismarck, and I've done a little bit of sleuthing and haven't found anything yet. But
it didn't end up in the historical.
Because I know a ton
of that early Schneider Films stuff ended up going to Bismarck and was put into the historical society.
So in like 58, would Schneider have been?
Yeah, he would have been in business. Yeah.
Okay, so that footage more than likely doesn't exist. But if it did, that would be a gold mine for my family.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All the stuff like that, all the old interviews with heads of state where there's outtakes or there's what was going on where the camera's rolling but it didn't make to air.
Exactly. My old business partner, when I first started my first production company, Pro Video, Conrad Rose, was my first business partner. And Conrad had worked at CCO in the Minneapolis for a while in film. He started his business, or started his film world at Schneider Films. So it would have been in that early 60s time frame. I'm trying to figure out, it was Nixon. Nixon was in town and his daughter, and they were going to go take him on a sleigh ride or something like that. So back in that day, you had your film camera and then you had your sound recorder, your NAG or whatever, and you would put that someplace, and that's how so he hid his NAG on the sled and the mic and on the. So the president got on, his daughter, they took off with Secret Service. Anyways, they go for this sled ride, and then Secret Service finds this recorder, and now they are not happy with Conrad about this, so they drag him aside, put him in a room, lecture him about, what are you trying to do here? This is, you're trying to record the president. And it became this whole deal where he had to say, he's like, you know what, here's the deal. I was shooting news. This is a news story. If you want to arrest me, arrest me. Otherwise, give me my recorder back, and I'm going to go back because Conrad was a little ornery sometimes back in those days when it came to that. But that was one of those stories when you talk about how that stuff was out there, and I don't know where that clip is either. You know, those kind of pieces and parts of the local, the history parts of those things. So it would have been. Like,
what is he going to tell his daughter on that sleigh ride? All right, here's my enemies list, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you never know. He did not have a great history with recorders.
So. Had a great history with your grandmother, though.
Let me tell you who I'm screwing today. The Nixons and my grandparents were friendly.
Really?
Yeah. So when he was in town, they had lunch with him because my grandmother was head of like the North Dakota Republicans ladies group.
Very cool.
And so in my house now, I have a bunch of correspondence between them of like, thank you so much.
That's
great. Lunch was great. We loved the cucumber sandwiches.
Was he the Veep at that point?
Yeah, he was the Veep at the time. Yeah. But even into his presidency, they still traded correspondence.
Wow.
And so, and it's like, like tell Jim I say hello, and Pat says hello from the White House. And so I've become this weird, like Nixon, like creeper. So I've got all of like these books on him, and I'm like, it's too bad you were friends with Nixon. Like, why couldn't it have been Carter? But it's really neat. Recently, there was a book on Nixon that was a collection of the love letters that he and his wife wrote back and forth to each other that show an entirely different side of that man.
Yes, filthy. Just filthy.
Just horrible.
No, I'm kidding.
Interesting fact. Do you know how he met his wife?
You told me this, but...
Yeah, doing summer stock theater.
Wow.
Yeah. Dick Nixon did theater. Can you imagine him up on stage being like, ought to be or not to be?
Yep. Theater and bowling, those were his things.
I get such a big kick out of that. But like the Fargo Public Library still hangs its hat on like, and the vice president, then here to be president, visited here, and we saved the steps. I just get such a massive.
So now if we could just find those audio tapes for you on the sleigh, but maybe your family was on the sleigh ride. I don't know.
Right, yeah. Maybe they're standing offside. Maybe they're the ones who tipped off the Secret Service. Be like, I think that those commies over there are trying to set up our vice president.
Conrad Rose with his flat top haircut and just just typical looking.
So tell me, do you have advice for people who are going to be on like a corporate video? What to do with their hands? Because is it amazing how somebody who is going to talk all of a sudden doesn't understand how to be a human being?
Yes. Yeah, it is. And it's that whole trying to put them at ease. And it's for some reason when you do put a camera in front of somebody, it's instantly
it's like a stranger is staring directly at you from 5 feet away.
Yeah.
It's weird.
And it's a lot of times, we'll do, interviews and we just talk a lot about, I'll set up a camera and I won't stand behind it. I'll frame it. I'll just stand off the side, even if it's somebody else doing the interview, just so it doesn't feel like somebody's just glaring into the eyepiece, watching every move you make. But a lot of times it's just trying to get them to relax, get them to not think about it. But you can tell. I mean, you can tell when they start overthinking it and they start sweating and they get the nose sweat or the upper lip sweat, and
pick up a coffee cup and their hand is shaking so hard they can't drink
so
from
then
it.
You just try to work yourself past that for a ways and let them, because it's an anxiety, it's a transition. At some point you can help them get past, and when you finally say, okay, we're not rolling anymore, let's just of course you keep rolling it, but you gotta get them past that point of they're overthinking it and becoming that what they're not. But
I've been present at a couple of shoots where it is just a dumpster fire watching like the president of this company, and it's not that they've got bad information, it's they just don't, they're more comfortable in front of a board table than they are in front of a camera. And stuff like they keep saying pink when they mean to say think, like I pink that we should move forward as a company. And at the end of it, when they finally go like, okay, well that's a wrap, and they're like, I think that went really well. That was good work today, everybody.
Yeah,
I would actually have a piece of advice, even though it's Kerry is the expert in the room, but I used to interview poker players for the Heartland Poker Tour. Yeah. I mean, and these weren't like celebrity poker players. These were just, Tim and Jane coming up from the farm to play. Especially like if you've got the boss and they're trying to get through a whole bunch of lines that they need the employees to hear, typically what happens is they'll get caught up in like one word or one phrase that they always break on. It doesn't work. And then they feel like they got to start from the beginning again. And what I always coach that person is that when we edit this together, we're going to take the best pieces of everything you say and put them in an order. So if you've got a big couple paragraphs you got to get through, if you mess up, just mess up, start at that word again and keep going, because the rest of the take might be perfectly usable. Yeah. And if that's the segment that you keep getting hooked up on, that's fine. We'll go back and we'll do just that. But we'll treat things like Fabergé eggs. Like, I got to do all of this at once. And if I mess up one little bit, the whole thing needs to be thrown away. And I'm going to start from the beginning again. And then their frustration mounts.
Right.
And that's the thing that keeps making bad takes over and over again, keeps you there for hours and hours at a time.
Yep. And that's good advice, because for the most part, we do cut it. You cut it all up, and you're just trying to get little bits and pieces here and there. And it just depends on what the project is, for sure. You know, I mean, there are some times where I need 10 solid seconds on camera, you looking there and get it right. So I did have Austin Shower. I know at least 2 shoots we were on, and Austin was anchor at DAY forever on the weekends, and he was a reporter, and then he went anchored over at KVRR, I believe, before. Now I think he's a legislator now.
Yeah, he sure is.
So he is? Really?
So I remember many a shoots where it would be take 16, 17 of him trying to get his, the closing statement. The reporters always have to give their little blah, 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 blah. And it would be 16, 17, 18 takes trying to get this 15 seconds worth of whatever it was. And it's just one of those deals where, not every time Austin would do it, obviously, but it would happen. And I'm sure you've had that experience where you're sitting in your own studio and you're like, why can I not say this? It's right in front of me. I can read it.
Mm-hmm. Kind of Winnebago Man style, though.
Yeah,
basically.
Exactly.
That guy rules.
It is kind of weird. And everybody's has those good days and bad days. But yeah, there's a lot of times. And I have a lot of people that we work with that are presidents or, vice presidents of company, and they'll actually go do and take speech lessons and presenting lessons, or what presentations, or how to stand up and talk and do it in a way that. And I know a couple of them in town, and actually now they're fabulous speakers. Yeah, I watch them speak, and I'm like, you are so smooth now. It just rolls off, and you engage the room, and you look back and forth, and you get it. But they actually went off on their own to learn it, to practice it, to get coached to do it, because it's not always. And it's not just like you said. It could be in a front of a boardroom. I'm good. All of a sudden, when the camera's there, or it's narrowed down or whatever, and now all of a sudden it doesn't work for them. So,
have you ever had a project where while you're working on it, like while you're doing the actual raw pieces of it, you instantly go like, "This is going to be one of the greatest things I've worked on." Like where it just starts gelling together, or you get a little sound bite that you weren't expecting. Like, for example, like if you and Schultz were out, like a bald eagle landed on his arm or something like that.
I think most of the shoots we end up on, you're looking for those golden nuggets, and that's what kind of motivates you anyways. That's why you're forever pressing. And one more time, let's one more. You always that one more question. I just got one more thing. Just gonna ask it. But yeah, there's that moment or those moments that happen where I did a documentary piece with Wheeler on polar bears in Churchill, Manitoba, and we ran into a couple of different people up there, and they were just great. They were great sound. They were, great interviews. And you're listening to every little thing they're saying. I'm like, oh my God, that's a great soundbite. And like they say something, oh my God, that's another great soundbite. So your head as you're shooting is instantly starting to piece these. What's this story going to feel like? And knowing that, that time it was going to be a 5-part series, or a half-hour special, and your head is already starting to try to piece together, the story. And it's so. I think for most part, I mean, there are times where we get done. I'm like, holy hell, we got nothing. What are we going to do with this?
That's the feeling that's the worst, where you've been filming for 5 hours and you're like, this isn't good. Nope. This is not.
Nothing
this
here.
Is,
we're
no
going to
good
fix
sound
it in
bites.
post.
Yeah.
And
today's, where I live, in the industry I'm in, on the marketing side now, we'll just sit there and keep going. But back in the news days, the news was on tonight at 6. Mm-hmm. It's 10 a.m. and you don't have anything shot yet. Yet the news goes on tonight at 6, and your minute and 40-second story better be in there. So those were the days where it was, and I think that trained you a little bit to adapt, to modify in your head in the field, to say, okay, we got to change this up a little bit. This wasn't the story we thought it was going to be. How do we still make it a story that's intriguing to the viewer and all those kind of things? So what are you going to adapt? What are you going to?
I think having a deadline every day teaches you to look at things differently. I can't tell you the number of times where it's been 10:45. My show starts in 15 minutes, and I know that there's 3 hours of me in front of a microphone, and I all of a sudden say, like, okay, well, what have I not looked at today in a different manner? Like, okay, wait, the boat show's in town this weekend, and I don't want to do just an interview about the boat show, but what could be out there? And be like, okay, well, aluminum docks, can those get hit by lightning? Let's figure something out. Let's get a lightning expert. By lightning. And be like, does that happen? Like, what's going on? And you just start to like,
aluminum boats, can they be hit by lightning? We'll answer that question when we come back. But first, Matt's Auto.
Yes.
But you start to, you force yourself to get through the grind, right?
Yep.
And I do think it makes people, like, the podcast for me is great because I don't have the same deadline I did before. And I get this, like, get these fun conversations where we talk about you guys partying with Motley Crue.
Yeah. But I think you're totally right. The whole concept where I can just bury it and say, well, you know what, I'll get back to it tomorrow. Ain't happen.
You're right.
Tomorrow is another problem. I got to fix this one today now because I have 3 hours to fill. And it's got to, and every show is a little different, as you know.
Yeah, some are good and then some are real dumpster fires.
Right.
That you like, smells I like. That show, that better not happen during our ratings period. Bacon.
But the beauty of that is that you're the one that's going to remember it longer than anybody else does. And so you try to, my head was always, I did 1,000 pancake feeds, I'm sure, over my career of shooting news. And it's like, I don't remember any of them, but I did them, and they filled some time and did what they were supposed to do. They gave that wonderful organization the due they deserved on that for doing those great pancakes to raise money to do something.
And hey, you paid the bills, right?
Yeah,
you got the bills paid, and you did it by doing video production.
Yeah,
and there was someone at home going, "God damn it, I missed the goddamn pancake feed."
I knew there was something we should have been doing this weekend.
I was told years ago, and I love this piece of advice, which is, on radio, you say something and it just disappears. Like, it's gone after that. And unless it's the FCC, no one's ever going to hear a recording of it if you don't want it to be. And the news was the same way, too, until the invention of the DVR, which has led to some of, like, my sister will send me clips from the news where, like, a weatherman will accidentally walk into, like, the frame at something and go, uh-oh, and then walk back. And I always think what a bummer it is on TV nowadays because you don't have that. It just disappears. It'll live there forever. You don't even have to hit record on a DVR anymore. It's just automatically like saving that 2 hours until the next 2 hours.
And to your point earlier about whoever was saving all these blooper clips, and now all of a sudden they put them up on the internet. Now they are really, really forever here. And, and I start looking on YouTube or whatever, and I'm seeing things Kevin Wallen and I did on an aircraft carrier back with Gil Rude from Hillsborough, and it's like, who put that up there? Because it's not like, because you have to go get it and find it, convert it, and put it up there. But somebody did, so some people do.
Yeah,
and
it must be kind of neat to, like, all of a sudden a piece of yours pop up on YouTube because somebody had a VHS tape that they had saved for what?
Because I didn't have a copy of it.
Yeah.
I'm glad somebody did. That's everybody says, well, all these stories and all these places you've been. And I mean, do you have the clips of you guys sitting down with Diane Sawyer and just blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't have any of it. I did it. We worked in that news business and even some of the other stuff, I've done TV spots for Michigan State University, and I did a whole LIM fashion college in Manhattan. I did this long, and so I have some of those. Those are current clips, but it's like, where did you do them? And you get to the next. What's my next thing? What are we going to do next? And so sometimes you forget about, and time passes. The next thing you know, it's 5-6 years later, and you're like, where was all that footage? Did we save all that? Did it go someplace?
I'm still going through all of my old just personal mini DV tapes and trying to just get them digitized so that I have that footage forever. But man, would I wish I could go back and tell myself, blank out each of these with black time code first, because that's the biggest bane of my existence right now, is trying to capture that stuff.
That's
the
right.
only protocol you have is FireWire, and you're just at the mercy of that. It kills me. So now what I do, I do 2 captures of a tape. I do an analog capture that's not going to have problem with FireWire, but it looks like a crappy signal. And then I do a digital capture, and then I line them both up at a timeline, and I see, are there segments of the digital capture that I didn't get? And I can only tell if I have the analog capture. So I have to piece it together, and it is a pain.
Yeah.
So luckily we don't live in that world anymore of tapes, but still, oh my goodness.
Was your rack that you kept your mini DV tapes like a Magic the Gathering plexiglass thing?
It was from, it was a card holder that I bought from Lantern Comics and News when they were closing. And it was the perfect size for a mini DV tape. You could fit 4 or 5 tapes in a little thing, and it would have held probably 200 of them. And it doesn't exist anymore. It's been shattered into pieces. But yeah, it was nice for those. But now I just keep them in a box.
Just a box. It's under a drippy ceiling tile and next to my magnet collection.
He's learned. They're plastic totes with covers on.
Yeah.
Kerry, I'm curious. There are people out there who think that they need to move to LA or New York to be able to do what they love. And if somebody is listening to this and their drive is to be a part of, making documentaries, making, capturing life on film, what do you have to say to them?
I think you can live anywhere you want. Talent is talent. Are there really talented people in LA and Chicago, New York? Absolutely there are, but not all of them. There's a lot of people that work in those markets that aren't good at what they do, but they still live there and they still have jobs. I think, and I've watched over the years, there's a lot of talented young filmmakers that are coming up through and their whole world is so different than where I had to go and what I had to do, because they've had video cameras with them at all times of their lives. They don't know anything other than having a video camera because they've always had a cell phone that took videos. But they've also gone to, the HDR or HDR cameras or just the still cameras that you pulled.
Oh, the DSLRs?
DSLRs.
Yep.
I'm sorry, my brain went. So then they have those, and they're great little cinematic telling machines that they've worked on. So I look at some of the stuff across anywhere from Fargo all the way, to Dickinson. There's a lot of young, super talented, and you can be super talented and do great stuff and live in Bismarck or Fargo or Grand Forks or Minot or wherever, or Fessenden or Pickett. I mean, you don't have to live. What you do have to do is you have to have some connections, because the only way whatever you're doing is going to make it into a market, or even whatever I did, for us to be able to shoot for Michigan State and for LIM, and it's because I met a director that lived in New York, and we hit it off. And back to when we started this, is I know a guy. Yep. So you have a guy, you have a connection. You have to have some of those, because you're not going to get to the Toronto Film Festival just because you sent them an email or or some kind of a message. You do have to, but you have to establish relationships, and it's back to that too, because that's truly what all of this is about, whether it's marketing or sales, or it's those relationships. You trust people. You trust that when you hire somebody, they're going to actually do a great job, and it's going to deliver what you wanted them to do for you. So that's what I would tell them. I said, you still got to work on that relationship. You still got to make connections, but you also, if you're talented and you can show people that you're talented, they'll use you. They certainly will.
I think that's a great way to wrap this up. Kerry, thank you so much for coming on JJ Meets World. If people want to check up and see what you're doing at all, are you on Twitter or anything like that?
I am.
You don't want to give it out? That's fine. That's fine.
I just don't use it very often. I don't. I must be that age. I spend a lot of time on the internet. I do a lot of things, and I read a lot of people's stuff, but I don't post very much. So
okay, so follow Blake Shelton's Twitter account.
Whatever's Blake doing,
you're right there behind him.
Right there
just
with
imagine
him.
You're taking the picture.
Exactly.
You're taking the selfie and all of those things.
I am. Yep. And Gwen, she's a great gal. I really like her too. So.
Your stepmom?
My stepmom. That's weird.
Well, isn't Blake your younger father?
My younger dad.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
A huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring this podcast. Folks, if you're looking to buy or sell a home, contact Natalie Deutsch today, because Natalie Deutsch is not only a previous podcast guest, she's somebody who's going to care enough to sell your property for top dollar. She's also going to find you the best price possible if you're purchasing a new home. Last year, on average, Natalie earned her clients $4,000 over list price on their homes and sold them faster than the market average. On average, Natalie's selling a home every 3.74 days. That's 2 homes a week. Those numbers don't lie. Find out why Natalie is one of the top agents in this entire market. Get a hold of her today, Natalie at hatchrealtyfm.com. You can also call 701-388-9338 or go on to livefargomoorhead.com. That's livefargomoorhead.com. Read all of her amazing reviews and then listen to her episode of JJ Meets World. Thanks again to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode of JJ Meets World and would like to help us continue to produce 2 new episodes every week, you can donate to our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/JJ Meets World and donate today. Even as little as $1 a month can go a long way. Visit our website at www.jjmeetsworld.com or hit up our social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the sites the kids are using these days. If you'd like to stay up to date on new episodes of JJ Meets World, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you consume the podcast that you love. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by checking out www.moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, go to linebenders.com, and you can find direct contact info for JJ. Kerry disclosed to us that he was 22 years old when that Motley Crue story happened, and I really think that there's probably a part of him that goes like, why'd you have to be so lame? You probably have a travel alarm clock.